ETHA's colleague sent me a photo of him hugging his secretary. Keep an eye on her. Sister-in-law. He said. I didn't take it to heart. Because ETHA had shown me the group photo of his company. Among a bunch of pretty girls. That secretary had no makeup on. Her face was sallow. And she was as ordinary as could be. He had also complained about her to me countless times. I've never seen such a stupid person. She can't do anything right. She's just average looking and doesn't know how to dress up. She's ruining the company's image. I still remember clearly the tone of his disgust. But later, he actually beat up her fiancé for her sake and was detained for 10 days. When the 10-day detention period was over, I went to pick up ETHA. At the entrance of the police station, I also saw his secretary, Mandy. She stood at the door with her shoulders hunched, and when she saw me, she moved aside a bit more. I lowered my eyes and ignored her. ETHA came out of the police station and rushed towards me the first moment. He hugged me tightly in his arms. Nina. You still came. I missed you so much. My gaze passed over ETHA's shoulder and landed on Mandy. She stared in our direction with red eyes and choked out. ETHA. ETHA's body stiffened for a moment. He grabbed my hand. Didn't even glance at her. And walked towards the roadside to hail a taxi. Let's go home first. Do you want to eat at home or go out today? ETHA. ETHA. Mandy followed closely behind, repeating ETHA's name with a sobbing voice. Just like how her presence had always loomed between ETHA and me for the past 4 years. ETHA still didn't pay attention to her, but he suddenly tightened his grip on my hand. How about we go to the vegetable market later and buy a few crabs? Aren't you the most fond of them, ETHA? Mandy still called out. Why are you so tactless? I did not hear you. I'm ignoring you on purpose. Can you stop following me? My wife is here. Have you no shame? ETHA couldn't hold it in any longer and turned around to shout at Mandy. Mandy stood there, looking at ETHA with red eyes. And big tears fell down her face. I just wanted to thank you and give you a safety rope. She opened her palm, and there was a bright red rope in her hand. I'll say it again. I beat that man up has nothing to do with you. I just couldn't stand seeing him hitting a woman. No matter who it was that day, I would have stepped in to help. You can get lost. ETHA seemed to lose control of his emotions. After shouting, he directly dragged me into the car. I looked at my hand that was red and by his strong pull and lowered my eyes. Mandy didn't give up. She kept running after our car. When the driver saw this, he asked us, that woman behind seems to be looking for you. Do you want me to stop the car? ETHA said irritably. No. Let her follow if she wants to. Then he held my hand and continued. Let's also buy some spare ribs. Do you want garlic-flavored spare ribs or sweet and sour spare ribs? It seemed that he was seriously discussing the dishes with me. But he didn't know that he had glanced at the rearview mirror countless times. And his hand was also unconsciously rubbing the back of my hand. This was a subconscious action he would have when he was anxious and restless. I also looked at the rearview mirror. Mandy kept running after the car persistently. Probably because she was chasing too urgently. She suddenly tripped and fell. Stop the car. ETHA shouted. Before the car had even come to a complete stop, the car door beside him had already been opened. ETHA strode towards Mandy, not even bothering to close the car door properly. In the rearview mirror, I saw ETHA helping Mandy, who had fallen to the ground, back up. Mandy squatted down and looked up at him. I didn't know what she said, but she kept crying. ETHA paused for a moment and reached out to wipe her tears. Mandy directly held his hand and put the safety rope she had brought just now on his wrist. And ETHA didn't seem to have the intention of pulling his hand back. I withdrew my gaze, closed the open car door, and said, Driver, let's go. But my heart felt desolate. 10 days ago, when I received that call, I vaguely realized that something seemed to have changed between ETHA and me. I was originally at work in the company when I suddenly received a call from ETHA's colleague. Something has happened to President ETHA. Sister-in-law. Come quickly. My heart skipped a beat. I asked my leader for leave and rushed directly to ETHA's company. When I arrived, I found Etha pinning a man to the ground and beating him. The look of anger and mania on his face was something I had never seen before. It was like a strange Etha. The man on the ground had already been beaten by him until he was bleeding and couldn't move. But his fists still didn't stop. If he kept hitting, something bad was definitely going to happen. I called Etha's name beside him, but he seemed not to hear me. I could only go over and pull him. Etha. Stop hitting. Get lost. He directly pushed me away. I was caught off guard and fell to the ground. My elbow and knee were bruised, and the pain made tears well up in the corners of my eyes. Just as I was about to get up, I saw Mandy rushing out of the crowd crying, "Etha. Stop hitting." With just that one shout, Etha stopped. I stared at him in a daze. The pain in my elbow and knee seemed to magnify in an instant, stimulating my tear ducts and making me cry uncontrollably. Mandy went over and pulled Etha up. She touched the bruised and swollen part of his face with red eyes. "Does it hurt?" Etha seemed impatient and shook off her hand. But he still replied to her, "It doesn't hurt. Why are you crying? You're already ugly. And now you're even uglier." At that moment, they seemed more like a couple. And I was like a clown who had fallen to the ground. The chill and unease in my heart were spreading. Someone reminded Etha. "President Etha. Sister-in-law is here." Etha turned around and saw me. The panic on his face was beyond concealment. He ran over and helped me up from the ground. "When did you come? Why did you fall? Does it hurt?" I suddenly wanted to laugh. But as I laughed, my tears flowed even more profusely. In the past, no matter how out of control Etha was, as long as I showed up, he would listen to me and calm down. He had once held me and said, "Mina, whenever I'm impulsive, I can't hear anyone calling me, but I can only hear your voice." He said, "I'm so lucky to have you." But now? No. How could that person have become Mandy? A Mandy whom he had despised in front of me for 4 years. Mandy was Etha's assistant who had been with him for 4 years. In the first year she was hired, Etha and I weren't married yet. We were just dating. And Mandy had a fiancé at that time. In the first year, I always heard Etha scold her. "She can't even learn simple big data crawling. And she's a college graduate. I don't know how she graduated." I've reminded her many times that she should dress up a bit when accompanying me to meet clients. She's already ugly and doesn't want to wear makeup. She's just embarrassing the company. I can't stand having such a clumsy and image-neglecting assistant. I'll tell the HR department to fire her tomorrow. But Mandy still stayed. In the second year, Etha and I got married. Mandy wasn't on the guest list for the wedding. After the wedding, while Etha was taking a shower, I accidentally saw his phone left on the table, and there was a message from Mandy. After a moment of hesitation, I still clicked to read it. Mandy sent a message saying, "President Etha. I cancelled my engagement with him today." I frowned, not understanding why an assistant would report the personal matter of cancelling her engagement to her superior. And she had to choose the very day when Etha and I got married. Etha came out of the bathroom. I held the phone and asked him, "Why did Mandy tell you that she cancelled her engagement?" Etha was also speechless at that time. "How would I know? She's either bored or crazy." He took the phone, glanced at the chat record, and then threw it aside, with a look of disgust. He said, "She's just average looking. And her taste is just as bad. Her fiancé is a gambler. When he's out of money, he comes to the company to look for her all day long, making the company a mess." Seeing his tone of such disgust, I didn't take Mandy seriously at that time either. But things seemed to have changed quietly. It was in the 3rd year of Mandy's employment. One night, I received a message from Etha's colleague, sister-in-law. "You should pay attention to her." In the photo I saw, the person Etha was hugging was Mandy. Etha had shown me the group photo of the female colleagues in his company. Among many young and pretty girls, Mandy had no makeup on. Her face was sallow, and she was as ordinary as could be. Etha wasn't without pursuers. He graduated from a prestigious university. was good-looking, and had a good job. There were many good-looking and charming people who pursued him. He didn't care about them at all. After firmly rejecting them, he would always hold me and say, "My wife is the best." Of course, I also had good personal conditions. I graduated from a 985 university and had a job and appearance that matched his. So I thought that it was impossible for him to take a liking to Mandy. Moreover, before this, Etha had also informed me that his company was having a dinner party, and they were going to play Truth or Dare. I thought that this should be the punishment for him losing at Truth or Dare. But this incident still planted a small thorn in my heart. So, later I also went to Etha's company. Mandy was indeed just like what I saw in the photo. She didn't dress up, wore a simple t-shirt and jeans, didn't wear makeup, and her face was rather yellowish. She sat among some young and pretty girls. And she really wasn't good looking. When Mandy saw me, she shrank back and hid far away, as if a mouse seeing a cat. When she came over to pour me tea, her hands were shaking so much that the tea spilled onto the table. She was so scared that her eyes turned red, and she choked out apologies to me repeatedly. "I'm sorry, Nina. I didn't mean to." When Etha saw this, he cursed at her. "Clumsy. You can't even do such a simple thing right. Get out." Mandy left my sight crying. All along, Mandy had always been the one being scolded. She was timid, ordinary, and had no shining points. She was the most indistinct face among the common crowd. I thought that Etha really hated her. But why? In the 4th year, would Etha lose his mind and start a fight for Mandy's sake? I learned about the whole story. The person who was beaten was Mandy's ex-fiancé Nathan, who had already broken off the engagement. Because he had lost a lot of money gambling, he came to Mandy to ask for money. Mandy refused to give him any. So he directly slapped Mandy, swelling up her face. When Etha found out, he immediately rushed out and beat him to a pulp. Nathan was unhappy and reported it to the police. Etha was given an administrative detention of 10 days. Before he went in, Etha hugged me tightly. "Nina, it's not what you think. When I get out, I'll give you an explanation." But where was the explanation for me? Was it that he left me in a hurry to see Mandy who had fallen? Or was it that he put on the safety rope she gave him? I sat alone in the car and, before I knew it, had tears streaming down my face. And my heart was also dead inside. When I got home, the food I had cooked was still on the table. I sat at the dining table, from dawn to dusk, watching the food go from appetizing to completely unappetizing. But I still couldn't wait for Etha. I lay down to rest. And Etha came back very late. He came over and hugged me, softly calling my name. "Mina. Mina." I closed my eyes and pretended to be asleep. He walked towards the bathroom. I opened my eyes and saw the safety rope on his wrist. When Etha came out of the bathroom, his phone happened to ring. Probably thinking I was already asleep, he lowered his voice and answered the call in the room. "What's the matter?" The bedroom was dim and quiet, and I could hear the voice of the person speaking on the other end of the phone. It was Derek, Etha's colleague and friend. "Mandy has already resigned in order not to let that matter affect you. Before, she broke off her engagement for you. I heard that she has been pestered by her fiancé because of this matter. She likes you. I don't believe you can't see that. She has done so much for you. Don't let her down." Etha was silent for a long time. It was so long that I had the illusion that he had already hung up the phone. Then I heard him say, "Got it." The other half of the bed caved in. Etha also lay down. Usually, he would come over and hug me. But now we were facing our backs to each other. And the distance between us was like a chasm. It couldn't be filled. His phone was on all night. In the morning, after Etha went out, I didn't go to work, because my stomach was slightly uncomfortable. I asked for leave and went to the hospital. I happened to meet Derek, Etha's friend, there. He saw me too. "Let's have a cup of coffee," I said. Derek said bluntly, "There's no need for coffee. I know what you want to ask. About Mandy, right? Mandy is not as pretty as you." doesn't have as good a family background as you, and isn't as excellent as you. However, she cooks for Etha, helps Etha block alcohol, and has accompanied him many times when he was in a bad mood. Isn't that what men want? All you give Etha is pressure. His family background is not as good as yours. He's worried about being looked down upon by your parents, so he can only work hard and treat you like a princess. So, don't ask why. You'd better reflect on yourself first. I listened to these words in disbelief. It's true that my family background is better than Etha's, but my parents thought he was steady and motivated. When we got married, they didn't require him to have a car or a house. Later, they also gave him a lot of support in his work, both financially and in terms of connections. It can be said that without the support of my parents, there would be no successful Etha today. But now, he complains that all these are pressures? When reading the wedding vows, he also vowed that he would never let me suffer the slightest grievance and would hold me like a treasure. Now, it's also his pressure. The soreness in my heart was spreading, and I laughed out loud. I drove back from the hospital. When I got home, Etha was just answering a phone call. When he saw me, there was obvious guilt on his face, and he almost immediately turned around and went to the balcony to answer the phone. A few minutes later, he came in and said with a look of annoyance, "It was a call from the newly hired assistant. She has to call and ask me about even the tiniest things." I lowered my eyes. In fact, I heard it. He was talking about resumes. Looking for a job. The only person who needs to look for a job now is Mandy. I just didn't expect that Mandy's resume was submitted to my company. When my colleague in the personnel department saw her resume, he even praised it. "This person's resume is really well done." The moment I saw the resume, I knew it was made by Etha. The color scheme and layout, every bit of it showed his personal habits. Etha is really good at making resumes. I made the first draft of all my resumes myself, and then he helped me revise and polish them. At that time, I joked, "Do you want to start a side business of helping others revise their resumes? It must be very profitable." He smiled and pinched my face. "My time is precious. Besides your resume, I don't have time to look at others. Now, all the uniqueness is like a joke." I lowered my eyes and had an idea in my heart. When I returned a resume to the little sister in charge of recruitment, I casually said, "She looks pretty good." The listener took it to heart. Mandy thus joined our company. She still had no makeup on. Her face was a bit sallow, and she came to work wearing an ordinary t-shirt and jeans. She also had a red safety rope on her wrist. It was exactly the same as Etha's. When she saw me, she wasn't very surprised. She greeted me, "Mina." I glanced at her. Later, we met in the pantry. Besides me and Mandy, there was also Sister Ben, who was keen on introducing people to each other. "Mandy doesn't have a boyfriend yet, right? I'll introduce one to you. He has a pretty good job." Mandy mumbled that she didn't need it, but when she saw me come in, her eyes suddenly changed. And so did her attitude. She smiled and agreed. "Thank you, Sister Ben. I'll meet him." The hot coffee spilled out of the cup. Before I could react, Mandy took a tissue and covered my hand. "Mina, be careful of the burn." Saying words of concern. There was a bit of eagerness and pride on her face. I frowned. When having dinner at night, Etha was playing with his phone while eating absentmindedly. Suddenly, he slammed his phone on the table and said angrily, "Are women so afraid of not being able to get married that they rush to go on blind dates every day?" Blind date. I thought of the conversation between Mandy and Sister Ben in the pantry. I didn't ask who he was talking about, but just replied, "Men are unmarried and women are unmarried. It's very normal to go on blind dates at the right age. Why are you so angry?" Etha was taken aback, picked up some vegetables and put them in my bowl, and then forcefully changed the topic. "Eat more greens. They're very fresh." At around 10 o'clock in the evening, a call came to Etha's phone. We were sitting in the living room watching a movie together at that time, and his phone was placed on the coffee table. As soon as the phone lit up, I saw the name Mandy at a glance. Etha awkwardly touched his nose and cursed as he hung up the phone. Why is she calling me at this late hour? She's crazy. As he said that, he reached out and picked up the phone, turned it to silent mode, and then put it back in his pocket. He still sat on the sofa with me as if nothing had happened and continued watching the movie. A dozen minutes later, he suddenly stood up. I just remembered that I still have an email to deal with today. You keep watching. I'll go and deal with it. I clenched the remote control in my hand. Okay. Because our study has special sound priming treatment. Etha never closes the door when he works in it. He once said, "I'm afraid I won't hear you when you call me." But now the door of the study is closed. A few minutes later, the door of the study was suddenly pushed open violently. Etha held his phone and looked at me with suppressed anger. I've told you that there's nothing between me and Mandy. Why are you still doing this? I didn't understand. What did I do? You know it in your heart. After saying that, he slammed the door and left the house. I didn't know. I didn't do anything. Why should I bear such anger for no reason? I followed Etha out of the house and all the way to the bar. And I saw Mandy squatting on the roadside. She seemed different from usual today. She had made up her face specially. Instead of a t-shirt and jeans, she was wearing a red sleeveless short dress. She had some makeup on her face and was wearing high heels. When she saw Etha get out of the car, she immediately stood up and ran towards him crying. At the last step, she stumbled and fell directly into Etha's arms. Etha actually reached out to support her. It looked like a couple hugging on the roadside. Mandy sobbed in his arms. I shouldn't have disturbed you and Nina so late, but he touched me. I'm really scared. Etha took off his coat and put it on Mandy. You can come to me whenever you have something in the future. No matter what time it is. I seemed to be nailed to the spot. The wind blew towards me from all directions. And the coldness from the bottom of my heart spread to all my limbs. I called him. Etha. The two of them turned to look at me at the same time. Mandy rolled her eyes, pushed Etha away, and then sobbed and explained to me. Mina, don't get me wrong. There's really nothing between me and President Etha. I was just so flustered that I didn't know who to turn to. I had no choice but to call him. Don't blame President Etha. Blame me if you have to. As she said that, she cried even harder. The coat on her body slipped down, revealing obvious red marks on her arm where she had been pinched. When Etha saw me, he had a look of guilt and panic on his face at first. When he saw the red marks on Mandy's arm, his eyes instantly turned cold. He reached out to help Mandy put on the coat properly and protected her behind him. You don't need to apologize to her. If she hadn't introduced such a scumbag as a blind date for you, you wouldn't have been bullied by him tonight. If anyone should apologize, it's her who should apologize to you. I looked at Etha in disbelief. After understanding the reason why he suddenly lost his temper tonight, I suddenly felt it was ridiculous. So was he angry that Mandy went on a blind date? Or that I introduced his comeback to Mandy? Or that Mandy was molested? Or all three? But he was wrong. None of these three things had anything to do with me. The wind made my eyes ache. I took a deep breath and controlled my emotions. It wasn't me, it wasn't Nina who introduced him to me. I wanted to meet him myself. Mandy interrupted with tears in her eyes. She tugged at Etha's hand and looked at him pitifully with tears on her face. I know that the company has been gossiping because you helped me deal with Nathan. And Nina is also unhappy about this matter. So I thought that if I got married quickly, you wouldn't be talked about by others anymore. Etha said. You don't need to care about the gossip in the company. And you don't need to speak for her. Before she introduced a date to you, she didn't find out the other person's character. It's her fault that you were bullied tonight. Etha looked at me. Mina. You apologized to Mandy. That cold and firm tone was as if he was talking to a stranger. I remembered when I first joined the company. An old employee lost the data. But in order to keep his job, he shifted the blame onto me. He was an old hand in the workplace and had prepared all the evidence. Everyone thought it was my fault. I called Etha with a feeling of grievance and told him about it. Etha told me not to cry. And in the end, he came over and helped me solve the problem. I asked Etha. Did you ever doubt me? He hugged me and said. As long as you say it's not you, I will unconditionally believe you. I sniffled, clenched my fists, and said word by word. Etha. I said it wasn't me. Mandy took the opportunity to interrupt again. Etha. This matter has nothing to do with Nina. I couldn't stand it anymore. Shut up. Enough. But Etha shouted at me. Mina. I'm so disappointed in you. You never used to lie before. You would admit your mistakes when you were wrong and correct them when you knew you were wrong. I laughed until tears came to my eyes. I'm not wrong. What should I admit? Who is wrong now? And who is the one who won't admit it? He shattered the beautiful memories he had left in my heart over the past 8 years. Time and time again. I'm sad. Sad that we should have been doing well. But it turned out like this. Sad that the 8 years of my life that I wrongly devoted were a complete failure in the end. I looked at Etha. He was right in front of me. But his face gradually blurred in my heart. Something in my heart was gradually collapsing. Tears couldn't be held back and streamed down my face. Etha suddenly seemed a bit flustered. Mina. He wanted to come towards me. Mandy suddenly sneezed, which abruptly stopped Etha's steps as he was about to come over. She took off the coat she was wearing and returned it to Etha. Then she hugged her arms, looking sensible and pitiful with red eyes. Give your coat to Nina to wear, and then send her home. I'll be fine on my own. Etha glanced at me. And in the end, he put the coat back on Mandy. It doesn't matter. Since I'm already here, I should send you back. He turned to me and said. Go home and calm down by yourself. I'll be back later. I watched as Mandy took the front passenger seat. The car slowly started. Mandy rolled down the car window, leaned out and gave me a smile. It was provocative and blinding. I stood there for a long time. The tears had been dried by the wind, and the broken parts of my heart were slowly rebuilt by me. And they became even stronger. I don't want a rotten and spoiled relationship. But I won't let them have their way either. The homewrecker and the betrayer don't deserve happiness. A clear plan gradually took shape in my mind. I won't lose. Mandy, who came to work today, was very different from usual. She had makeup on and was wearing a plain white dress. The most eye-catching thing was the necklace around her neck, because of her great change today. Her colleagues gathered around curiously and asked if something good was coming up. She smiled shyly. No. I just suddenly wanted to change myself. I just saw this necklace in the mall the day before yesterday. It costs more than 20,000 yuan. Mandy, this change of yours comes at a high price. Mandy subconsciously raised her head and deliberately touched the necklace around her neck. It's not my money. It was given to me by someone else. Oh, this someone else must be someone special. Ordinary people wouldn't give such an expensive gift. They were chatting in the pantry. And I was making hand-ground coffee. I heard every word of their conversation. Seeing that I didn't join in, Mandy deliberately came over. The diamond necklace around her neck was very shiny. Mina, do you need any help? In just one night, she had really changed a lot. She was no longer as timid as before. Her show-off look was as if she was sure of victory. I gave her a cold look. No. Thank you. The other people in the pantry had left one after another, leaving only me and her. She said again. I'm sorry. When Etha sent me home last night, the water heater and shower head in my bathroom happened to be broken. He spent a long time fixing them and got his clothes wet. I thought it was inconvenient for him to go back, so I asked him to stay at my place for the night. But don't worry. Nina. Etha slept on the sofa in the living room. We didn't have anything happen between us. Do you want to steal him? I said. Mandy was stunned. What? Do you want to steal Etha? I looked at her and repeated. Mandy couldn't figure out what I meant for a moment. She looked at me quietly and didn't reply. I continued. But do you think Etha will divorce me? Your family background is average. And there's a gambler bothering you. Your own conditions. I provoked her. Mandy. What confidence do you have to steal him away? Mandy's face turned red and then white with anger. Don't look down on people. You're just relying on being born into a good family. Don't think you're superior. Is that so? Then I'll be waiting. Don't let me down. I looked at her resentful and vicious eyes and left with the brewed coffee. I went to Sister Ben and gave her Etha's phone number, asking her to do something for me. When we got off work in the afternoon, Etha appeared at the gate of the company, holding a bouquet of flowers. Mandy and I walked out of the company gate one after the other. Mandy waved at Etha excitedly. Etha just glanced at her, held the flowers, walked past her, and came towards me. He looked guilty. I'm sorry, Nina. I wrongly blamed you for what happened yesterday. I asked Sister Ben to tell him that it was she who introduced the blind date partner to Mandy. Mandy stood beside us and didn't leave. Her gaze, like needles, stayed on me all the time. I lowered my eyes, pinched the palm of my hand, and made myself feel the pain so that I could squeeze out a few tears. When I looked up again, I changed my expression. With tears in my eyes, I looked at Etha pitifully. I said it many times yesterday, but you didn't believe me. You left me alone on the roadside. You never used to be like this. You said that no matter what, you would believe me. I know Etha well. He is a soft-hearted and easily guilt-ridden person, especially sympathetic to the weak. Mandy took advantage of this to gradually squeeze into our relationship. She used it. And I can use it too. And I will use it better. Seeing me cry and thinking about wrongly accusing me yesterday, Etha felt even more guilty. Holding the flowers in one hand, he hugged me with the other and patted my back gently, coaxing me and apologizing in a low voice. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Stop crying. Okay? I'll take you to eat something delicious later. I pressed my face against Etha's chest sideways, and my gaze met Mandy's. She stared at me, and the jealousy and anger in her eyes almost burned me to ashes. I twitched the corner of my mouth. My tears that day had an effect. The feeling of guilt made Etha stay at home obediently these days. There were a few phone calls occasionally, and he would sneak to the balcony to answer them. But after answering the calls, he still stayed at home steadily and didn't go out. I didn't mention Mandy during this period, and Etha didn't bring her up either. I kept telling myself not to be in a hurry. The time hadn't come yet. These days, Mandy has been looking at me with resentful eyes in the company. It's useless to force someone who doesn't love you to stay by your side. This will only make him more miserable and hate you more. I looked at her expressionlessly. Didn't I tell you to steal him yourself? If you don't have the ability, who can you blame? You. Mandy's eyes were fierce, and she pointed at me. Don't speak too soon. Just you wait. The next day, Mandy took a sick leave. At around 9 o'clock that night, Etha's phone kept ringing. He hung up many times, but finally got up and went to the balcony to answer it. After answering the phone, he looked in a hurry. Nina, there's some urgent work at the company, and I need to work overtime. I'll go back first. You don't have to wait for me. Go to bed first. Okay. I watched him leave in a hurry, and then turned back to continue watching Hachi, A Dog's Tale. About 20 minutes later, I picked up my phone and saw that Mandy had posted a status on WeChat Moments. You said that I could come to you whenever I had something, no matter what time it was. You kept your word. There was a photo attached, showing her getting an IV drip in the hospital. There was another hand in the photo covering the infusion above the IV drip, acting as a hand warmer to make the liquid flowing into the blood vessels less cold. Both of their hands were wearing red safety ropes. Their faces weren't shown, but I knew who it was. The new intern in the company commented below. Sister Mandy, take care of your health. P.S. Your boyfriend is so nice. He even uses his hand to warm the infusion tube for you. Woo woo woo. Mandy replied. Thank you for your concern. But he's not my boyfriend. The new intern said. He will be soon. He accompanied you to get an IV drip in the middle of the night and you're wearing couple bracelets. I got up, took the car keys, and went out, driving to the hospital. Standing outside the infusion room, I saw Mandy leaning against Etha's shoulder with her eyes closed, and Etha's hand was still holding the infusion tube. I looked at them calmly, with no waves in my heart, but I had to cry. I began to recall the scenes from the movie Hachi, A Dog's Tale. The dog Hachi didn't know that Professor Parker was gone. It still went to the train station day after day to wait for Professor Parker. Until it was old and its steps were faltering. Finally, having fulfilled Radsai, Mrs. Parker returned to the old place and asked it with tears. You'll get sick. Are you still waiting for him? It was still waiting. It kept waiting. It explained that love is loyalty and waiting. A dog can do it. But a person can't. I felt that in the future, I would still get a dog. I finally shed tears. With tears on my face, I walked into the infusion room and called Etha's name with a crying voice and pain. Etha, didn't you say you were working overtime at the company? When Etha saw me, he was stunned for a moment. And then he pushed Mandy away in a panic and stood up. He even stuttered when he spoke. Mina. Why are you here? I picked up the stomach medicine I had prepared. I just checked the first aid medicine box and found that your stomach medicine was gone. I was worried that you would have a stomachique when you came back from working overtime. So I rushed out to buy it for you. With tears in my eyes and biting my lip, I looked at Mandy and then at him. But, should I not have come? Remember to take the medicine if you have a stomachique. I'll go first. I put the medicine on the ground and turned to leave. I heard the sound of footsteps chasing after me. And then Mandy shouted, Etha. But Etha still chased after me and ran outside. Nina. Etha anxiously grabbed me. I didn't cry or make a scene. I just looked at him with red eyes. His expression was flustered. Both guilty and eager. Mina. Mandy and I. We didn't do anything. I'm just taking care of her as a sister. You know. She has been my assistant for 4 years. And finally she resigned because of me. I have the obligation to take care of her. I said with a crying voice. But for the first time, you wrongly accused me because of Mandy and left me on the roadside. This time, you lied to me about working overtime. But you came to accompany Mandy to get an injection. I was so worried that you would have a stomachique without medicine that I went out to buy it for you in the middle of the night. You said she has been with you for 4 years. But what about the 8 years we've been together? How can I trust you? Etha's guilt grew deeper and deeper. He wiped my tears while raising his hand to swear. I will definitely not be alone with Mandy again. If this happens again, may I be struck by lightning. Okay? I lowered my eyes. Only children would believe such empty promises. That's not what I want. But I still softened my voice. Then you can't lie to me again. That night, instead of staying with Mandy, Etha came home with me. This matter made Mandy extremely angry. In the company, she smashed my cup. Mina. What right do you have to stop Etha from seeing me? It was me who accompanied him when he was emotionally broken. Me who blocked the alcohol for him. And me who cooked for him. He likes me. And you have no right to stop him. I sent her the price of the cup and said casually. Because I'm his legal wife. Mandy was at a loss for words. Finally, hadn't fulfilled l'absai. She shouted hoarsely with a red face. There will come a time when you cry. I'm waiting. Then Mandy went crazy. Since Etha refused to see her, she followed him from the company to the downstairs of the residential community and waited there. She stood directly below the balcony of my house and persistently sent messages to Etha. Etha, could you please come down and see me? Etha, I just like you. Is there anything wrong with that? Etha, it's really cold down here. I miss you so much. She followed Etha for a whole month. But Etha never met her alone. Etha came to me to take credit in a flattering way. Mina. I've done everything I promised you. I didn't go to see her. I looked at him and didn't say a word. At night, the wind blew and it started to rain lightly. I came out of the study and happened to see Etha walking in a hurry from the balcony into the living room. When he saw me, he paused for a moment and explained nervously. It's raining. I'm checking if there are any clothes on the balcony that need to be taken in. The balcony's position allowed one to see Mandy. I didn't expose him. As the night went on, the rain got heavier. I lay down while Etha was taking a shower in the bathroom. Messages kept popping up on his phone. ETHA. It's thundering. I'm so scared. Could you come down and keep me company? ETHA. Today is my birthday. I want to spend it with you. I won't leave until I see you. The sound of water in the bathroom stopped. I put down my phone and closed my eyes. The other side of the bed caved in. Outside the window, there was a violent storm with thunder and lightning. After a long time, I heard ETHA softly call my name. Nina. Are you asleep? I closed my eyes and didn't respond. Then he gently lifted the quilt, got up, and walked out of the bedroom and through the front door. I also calmly got up and went to the balcony. Mandy was really a crazy person who didn't care about her own life. She didn't take shelter even in the pouring rain. She just stood under the streeteltwide, soaked through. ETHA gradually appeared in my field of vision. Mandy saw him too. She ran straight towards him. Without saying a word, she stood on tiptoe, hooked her arms around his neck, and kissed him. At first, ETHA just let her kiss him. Finally, having fulfilledly, he reached out and put his arms around her waist, taking the initiative and deepening the kiss. In the rainy night, under the streeteltwide, they were embracing and kissing. How romantic. I watched calmly. ETHA didn't come back all night. I also didn't sleep all night. Mandy first posted a message on her WeChat moments at 1 o'clock in the morning. Although it's a bit late. As long as it's the right person. It's never too late. Happy birthday to me. And may you be happy forever. The accompanying picture was of her and another hand holding a knife together to cut a cake. Both hands were wearing red safety ropes. I gave it a like. At 5 o'clock in the morning, Mandy directly sent me a picture. She and ETHA were lying in bed, half naked and embracing each other. The quilt covered their lower bodies. Mandy, who said I couldn't get him? I thought I could already deal with it calmly. But when I saw this picture, my stomach still felt uncomfortable again and again. I rushed into the bathroom and vomited. It was so disgusting. After I finished vomiting, I sent a message to my best friend Cindy. It's time to close the net. I was at Cindy's house. She was the only one who knew what I was going to do. I needed her help so that ETHA wouldn't be suspicious. ETHA was outside the door. Could you please let me in and explain to Nina? Last night, I originally just wanted to go down and give Mandy an umbrella. But I didn't expect that she would directly kiss me and then ask me to send her home. Later, she kept persuading me to drink. After drinking, I didn't know what happened. I didn't mean to sleep with Mandy. Nina, could you please come out and see me? This morning, I directly sent him the photo that Mandy had sent me. He called me like crazy. I didn't answer any of his calls. After leaving him waiting for a while, I went out to see him. Let's get a divorce. ETHA. I said directly. ETHA shook his head without even thinking. It's impossible, Nina. I won't divorce you. Trust me. I don't like Mandy. What happened between me and her last night was just an accident. His reaction was within my expectation. I knew ETHA. He would only feel guilty again and again. But he wouldn't change. And he definitely wouldn't admit his infidelity in the relationship. So it was impossible for him to agree to a divorce. But it didn't matter. Getting a divorce wasn't the purpose of this step either. I said. You just swore last time that you wouldn't meet Mandy alone again. But what did you do last night? When I woke up in the middle of the night and saw that you weren't there, I thought something had happened to you. I kept calling you. But your phone was turned off. I was so worried about you that I couldn't sleep all night. But what about you? You were sleeping beside Mandy. ETHA. You've lied to me 3 times. How can I trust you? ETHA was eager to prove himself. Nina. Trust me one more time. Except for getting a divorce. I'll do anything you ask me to. I lowered my eyes and didn't answer. Cindy threw out a prenuptial property agreement tacitly and pressured him with her words. All your words are useless. There's no proof just by words. Unless you sign this agreement, I won't let Nina go back with you. In this prenuptial property agreement, it clearly listed the property ownership of me and ETHA after divorce item by item. If I got divorced from ETHA, All our property and shares would belong to me. In simple terms, if we got divorced, Etha would leave the marriage with nothing. At this moment, Etha was eager to keep me and also wanted to compensate me out of guilt. He thought that as long as we didn't get a divorce, everything could be discussed. Moreover, as long as we didn't get a divorce, this agreement would never take effect. He thought he would never get a divorce. So, without hesitation, he signed the agreement. And the other person, Mandy, was in high spirits in the company today. She was smiling so widely that the corners of her mouth almost reached her ears. As soon as I arrived at the pantry, she followed me to show off. The photo didn't turn out very well. Just take a look casually. I told you that Etha likes me now. It's useless for you to keep him by force through marriage. You'd better get a divorce as soon as possible. I turned around and looked at her. How do you know I haven't mentioned divorce? I played a recording. Let's get a divorce. Etha. Nina. Trust me one more time. Except for getting a divorce. I'll do anything you ask me to. I said. I've mentioned it. But there's no way. Etha is begging me not to divorce him. After hearing the recording, Mandy's face turned pale instantly. And she stood there stiffly. Still the same thing. If you have the ability, come and take him away. Of course. I would also provide the means. And it was a very sharp means. So, before I completely walked out of the pantry, I took out my phone and made a call. Dr. Liu? Can I make an appointment with you for a uterine surgery next month? Yes. After all these years, I still haven't been able to get pregnant. Mandy's eyes changed instantly. Mandy was quiet for almost a month. During this month, she just went to work and got off work on time. She didn't provoke me, hadn't fulfilled me. Nor did she look for Etha. Etha was even more well-behaved after that day. Except for the necessary working hours. He almost always stayed by my side. It was as if he was trying his best to prove something. However, he would occasionally stare blankly at his phone. More than a month later, Mandy suddenly put on makeup again and came to the company wearing high heels. She came to me. Do you still think I can't take him away from you? I looked at her inferently. She said, I'm pregnant. And it's Etha's child. That night, Etha didn't come back. The next day, Etha still didn't come back. On the third day, Etha came back. There was stubble on his chin. And his whole face looked haggard. But his eyes were particularly bright. Just like the look in his eyes when I agreed to his proposal. However, what he said to me now was, Mina, let's get a divorce. I took a small sip of milk. May I know the reason? He said, Mandy is pregnant. You can't have children. We haven't had a child in all these years. But I'm a man. And I want a child to carry on the family line. I'll accept giving all the property to you. Consider it as my compensation to you. I lowered my head to hide all the emotions in my eyes. Okay. I went through the divorce procedures with Etha. The next day, Mandy almost couldn't wait to drag Etha to get the marriage certificate immediately. After getting the certificate, she immediately announced to everyone. I've always believed that in the end, it would only be me and you. After Mandy came to the company, she almost couldn't wait to show off to me. She threw their marriage certificate in front of me. Did you see the words on it clearly? Mandy. Etha. Now, I'm Etha's legal wife. I said lightly. Congratulations. She snorted. Dividing the property equally in the divorce is really letting you off easy. But you can't have children. Considering that you're an incomplete woman. These money can be regarded as what Etha and I give you for your old age. I said softly. Who said I can't have children? You yourself made that phone call that day. And Etha also said that you've been trying to get pregnant all these years. But you haven't succeeded. When you went to the hospital for an examination, it was your problem. Oh, I just smiled and didn't continue the topic. Who told you that the property would be divided equally when I got divorced from Etha? Mandy was taken aback for a moment. What do you mean? I said. Etha was willing to leave the marriage with nothing for your child. Aren't you touched? Oh, you still don't know. I suggested to Etha that he temporarily not tell you about this. Mandy was stunned. In the end, she didn't even go to work and directly ran home. I heard that she went back and had a big fight with Etha, wanting Etha to come to me and get the money back. But the property that had been notarized legally and had already been transferred to my name couldn't be taken back so easily. Now Etha was just an ordinary white-collar worker who received a few thousand yuan a month. He didn't have any company shares and didn't have any property either. Mandy's dream of being a rich man's wife was shattered. She was unwilling and came to make trouble with me. But she was fired by the company instead. Now every time she appears at the company gate, the security guards stop her firmly and won't let her in at all. I also took this opportunity to ask for a long leave from the company and planned to go on a trip to relax. However, before leaving, I sent a gift to Etha. His infertility report. In the second year of our marriage, Etha and I had the intention of having a child. However, we tried to conceive for a year, but there was still no sign of pregnancy. My mother advised me and Etha to go for a medical examination. During that period, Etha was particularly busy. So I went to get the examination results alone. When I saw the results, I was in a daze. And my state of mind wasn't very good when I got home. Etha asked me about the examination results. I looked at him with a pale face and a complicated expression, not knowing how to start. He also looked at me for a long time. And then he hugged me. It doesn't matter if you can't have children. We just won't have them. I was taken aback for a moment. My lips moved, but in the end, I didn't say anything. Later, somehow, Etha's mother heard about this and called to threaten me, saying she would rather die than let it be. She said that he couldn't marry a wife who couldn't have children and asked him to divorce me immediately. Etha directly said, "Even if you beat me to death, I won't divorce Nina." I knew that Etha was actually a traditional person at heart, just like his parents. And I also knew his longing for children. For him to say those words for me, he must have made a great determination. I was touched by his sincerity at that time. So I took the blame for this. At first, Etha didn't want to believe the report from after he received it, so he went to the hospital for an examination himself. After seeing the same infertility examination results, he completely broke down. He went back and questioned Mandy about whose child it was. Mandy didn't want to say. So Etha started hitting her. And he even caused her to have a miscarriage. Afraid that Etha would beat her to death, Mandy quickly said that the child was her Nathan's. Nathan was a gambler who always came to ask Mandy for money and sometimes even forced her to have a sexual relationship with him. If Mandy didn't comply, he would threaten to go back and kill her parents. Nathan said that he had nothing to lose, and that it would be worth it to take a few people down with him before he died. Mandy got pregnant on the night when Nathan came to her. Mandy explained to Etha while crying, "I wanted to have the baby aborted. But Nina said that she had always been unable to get pregnant. That's why I thought of using this child to force you to divorce her and then marry me." As Mandy spoke, she suddenly realized something. Nina lied to me. It's all Nina's doing. She deliberately made me think that she couldn't get pregnant, provoked me to deceive you, and forced you to divorce her. First, she provoked me to go to you again and again. Then, let out a low sigh. She appeared as the victim, making you feel guilty, making me feel sorry for her, making you want to make up for her. And then made you sign that prenuptial property agreement that leaves you with nothing. Then she deliberately let me know the false news that she couldn't get pregnant. And then used the child to force you to divorce her. The first step was to find a way to make you sign the prenuptial property agreement. And the second step was to find a way to make you divorce. You left with nothing. And I got nothing. She even knew about my pregnancy. She is the final winner. Mandy laughed like a crazy person. Nina, you really played a great game. Etha slumped to the ground in a state of dejection, looking as if he had aged more than 10 years in an instant. How could this happen? How could this be? He had nothing left. He had nothing at all. I sent them a second gift. I found a way to let Nathan, Mandy's ex-fiancé, know that Mandy had now married a rich man. Then Nathan haunted them persistently. He was a desperate gambler who was afraid of nothing and only wanted to bleed them dry. When he was short of money, he would ask Mandy for it. If Mandy didn't give it to him, he would ask Etha. When Etha refused, he would start making a scene. He would smash things at home or grab Mandy and beat her. Etha couldn't stand such a life and proposed a divorce to Mandy. But Mandy refused to agree no matter what. She was afraid of facing Nathan alone and just wanted to drag someone else down with her. It was better to face Nathan together than alone. So now, Nathan was always getting in the way between the two of them. Just like Mandy had been between Etha and me at that time. Because Nathan owed money and didn't pay it back, debt collectors often came to their house to ask for the money. If they couldn't pay, the collectors would smash things. Forced to do so, they had to move frequently, living a life like rats crossing the street, neither human nor ghost. I also sent a gift to Derek. I sent the evidence of his unauthorized embezzlement of public funds to his company. The amount was huge. The company directly took legal action. He not only had to compensate the company for the losses, but also had to go to prison. Etha couldn't bear it any longer and turned around to shout at Mandy. Etha suddenly came to me. He looked much more haggard than before, with sunken eye sockets, a stubbly beard, and wrinkled clothes. He looked completely dejected. It seemed that he had been living a very bad life. Mina. He called me. I said coldly. Don't come any closer. He stood there, looking at me at a loss. I know I was wrong. Mina. I was bewitched before and was deceived by Mandy. I shouldn't have sympathized with her. And I shouldn't have betrayed you. I didn't know that you took the blame for not being able to have children for me. I'm sorry. Mina. I'm really sorry. Can you forgive me? It's impossible. I turned around and left. He shouted hoarsely behind me. Mina. Are you really that heartless? We were together for 8 years. How can you just forget about it? What on earth did these 8 years mean to you? I thought it was ridiculous. Who was the one who betrayed this relationship first? Who was unfaithful in this relationship? Why did he have the right to question me like this? But I didn't want to argue anymore. People and things that didn't matter weren't worth my emotions. I said, I consider myself unlucky. Later, I adopted a little dog named Nyangao. It waited for me to get off work and accompanied me for walks. During my spare time from work, I would also go on trips with Cindy to relax. I didn't pay any more attention to the matters of Etha and Mandy. And it wasn't worth my trouble to inquire about them either. The past has vanished like smoke. In the future, from now on, I give flowers to myself and ride a horse through the flowers towards freedom. The end of the full text.